Der Fuhrer. Der Fuhrer. And here I am trying to stamp out some burning cinder that fell on my arm. Okay. So, first of all, you can just look at this and look at the components. And this is from a certain era, you know. I think, let's see what the copyright is. I think this is actually mid-70s. Yeah, 76. Which is when wargaming was established, role-playing was coming in bigger, you know. And there was definitely a taste among gamers, among people, for a kind of game that was more than Monopoly and more than Risk, that handled subject matters, you know, and tried to address them, and maybe tried to address them with some level of verisimilitude. Well, you also, though, had this, hey, we can just print, you know, some little, and printing's gotten cheaper, but we can work through a printer and get some little thing like this out there with some pretty decent stock, etc. Paper was a lot cheaper back then, and, you know, probably sold for like $5. It depends on how big a print run they could get away with and whatever, but it probably was able to be put out fairly cheaply. Maybe 10 at the most. I'm almost guaranteeing the guy I knew who had a copy of this probably paid about $5 at a convention for it, as, you know, it was like, well, this looks cool, let me wait until the last day of the convention and see if, you know, things get marked down as they always do, because this is just not going to sell out. Or sometimes these showed up at auctions and whatever. So again, it's this slice from a period of time, and you never knew what you were getting, right? A game like this wouldn't have gotten into the reviews, the capsule reviews in S&T. It certainly wouldn't make it into the general. Maybe if it caught somebody's eye at Space Gamer or something like that, they'd give it a review and you might see something about it in that case. But for the most part, there were these tiny little printings that were just going under the radar all over the place. And what's amazing is some of them were pretty good games, and I would say this is one such. One of the things about it that I really like is it's a fairly simple platform of a design. And within that, it gives you a realm to compete in without obscuring things much. You can look at the tables, you can think about how the game works, and you're realizing it's the psychology of your opponents that's going to determine, you know, what your strategy is and how well it's going to work. And sure, luck plays a factor in it, to some extent, sussing out, you know, what these tables actually mean. For some of us, maybe we don't grasp it right away, and we have to play a game of it, or play half a game of it to start to get an idea of, maybe I should try this, maybe I should try this. But there's no sort of automated catch-up mechanisms or anything. What's in here is you work with the other players to try to prevent the victory. You know, it's not like, oh geez, you know, there's these carefully crafted one strategies, looks not that great to begin with, but it's going to gain you because you're building up and worrying about trying to bust through all this obfuscation in the system to try to decide, well, what's the optimal strategy? That's more the nature of the modern Euro to me, where it's, you know, meant to be played a couple of times, and then once somebody kind of figures it out, then it's just a question of, can other people figure it out, or and is it over at that point? Does it still have any playability? And the best ones, are still interesting even once a number of people have studied it a lot. The vast majority of them, I think, are the main point of interest to them is trying to figure out how the game works. Well, this one, sure, maybe the first election cycle you're going to have trouble figuring, you're going to feel like you're like, oh geez, why am I doing so poorly, what am I doing wrong? And then eventually you go to look at the charts and see why your choice wasn't a great one, or what it gives, what the advantages to any given choice are, and how you want to use that choice. The systems themselves to this, like I said, they're very, very simple. They're not trivially simple. It's not like a bidding game. I'm trying to think of an example of one. Because Kremlin has more to it as well. It has a simple system of bidding, but it also has the promotion and the job capabilities, which, again, nothing's obfuscated. It's not absolutely clear what the best strategy is, but you can kind of play it from the hip, and it works well. And I would say that this is similar in that sort of way. You make an initial choice as to what your platform is. Well, that's based on what your standing is, what kind of points you think you need to get, how big a chance you want to take, because you have this comparison between the charts here, which are not equally good, but they compare to the amount of political points you get for each of the different platforms that you can take. And the better platforms give you less points to invest. So it should all come out about equally. I'm not going to do the analysis on it. Somebody might, but I don't want to do that. Then you have this interesting question of where you're going to devote your resources. The bluffing game that's in it as to, can I get away with a lot of points here? Can I get a bonus out of this? Can I buy this state cheaply? Am I out of the competition for one of the big states, and then I want to concentrate on the little ones and score a lot of points building up that way? Just so many different options to go there. Do I want to run my score up early and look like a leader and almost certainly attract some opposing fire? And there's a number of different ways you can do opposing fire. In the third election, we didn't see any smears. In the second election, we saw smears. Because they made more sense in one election than in the other. In terms of using the workers or the street mobs or whatever to prevent somebody from getting points. A couple of players get free mobs, which is just kind of a bonus. You hold them off and try to use them to harm the person who's in the lead for that election. There's a strategic side to it too, which is you probably aren't going to win the game in a single election. You're probably not going to get that 30% bonus. But can you roll one election into the next and use the levers of power of the chancellor to improve your position? And none of that will work if you get shitty die rolls. So that's kind of cool too. In terms of a representational situation, I find that the equivalency that's given between the different parties, and that they can all pick any platform they want they can all pick from the same set of platforms except for the Nazis and communists. I think that flexibility is necessary from a gameplay point of view because, well, maybe not. It might be the case that you wouldn't want the more conservative parties to be able to take the pro-labor stance or the liberal stance or something like that. But on the other hand, if you don't give them that flexibility, you're beginning to restrict them too much, and you're beginning to almost script the game. Uh, the game doesn't nail things down entirely. So, for example, there's things in the rules like, do you pick your party platform openly in player order, which is what I did in my game, or is this a secret pick, giving another level of, well, if you picked... I kind of don't like that because it means that it's almost it's a chance factor as to whether or not two people slam into each other and have basically the same platform, and then it kind of comes down to who wins the die roll on how much political power they get. In terms of, so that's one of my objections in terms of sort of the historical side of things. Another that I brought up a lot in the the third video, the third election cycle of my playthrough, is it has this everybody loses condition. And most games that I've seen that have that are generally talking about a worse than just not winning condition. In this one, I feel like, honestly, in most cases, it's better than just not winning. So that a very common spirit that a lot of gamers have, which is, well, I didn't win, I'm not going to win, I might as well go for the draw of everybody losing. The concept that if you didn't win the game, you lost the game. Well, in this one, I think that actually applies better. Whereas the games that I'm used to seeing that in are games like, now I'm trying to remember, after the Holocaust, Republic of Rome, and I had another one that I had brought up in one of the videos that was a common case of this. Anyway, they're games where, Canadian Civil War. They're games where the condition where everybody loses is a very bad thing. So like Canadian Civil War, you're basically talking about the collapse of Canadian politics in a national emergency, which might be an actual civil war, it might be something else. It might be disruption, disunification. In Republic of Rome, you're talking about the fall of Rome if the game ends with nobody winning. Which is clearly a worse situation for all of these Roman patrician families than it would be the case of another player just won the game. I think, of course, it depends on how they won, perhaps, because your family might be singled out and executed because you're the enemy of the state, but they can't go eliminate all the Republican families or whatever. So, anyway, in this particular game, it feels like the conditions under which a player has won the game are ones in which the other players really have kind of lost their say in the political party, especially if you take the model of what actually happened to the Weimar Republic and how Nazi Germany was formed, essentially. Well, clearly if the Nazis win, it's a pretty bad thing, and probably the same if the communists win. You're probably talking about something along the lines of a complete destruction of that former very democratic model that the Weimar Republic had. What happens if, like, the Social Democrats become, such a powerful party that they've won a couple? I don't know if that's that bad a thing, You get the feeling that they aren't going to change the government completely to be too moderate. Jesus, I'm trying to remember what it was. Canadian Civil War it was, indeed. We played the 3-player scenario of it, and one of my friends called a national emergency because I was playing like the provincial moderates or something, and he was like the provincial conservatives, and then there were the separatists. And I was getting close to winning the game, and he called a national emergency or tried for one under the circumstances that, because I was almost winning, and it's kind of like in a role-playing type sense, trying to picture what he was doing, he was upset that the government was too moderate, which is just sort of ludicrous if you ask me. Anyway, I had a lot of fun with this. I even had fun with it solo, and I went into some of the reasons in the wrap. I think it's a pretty damn solid game. As a historical simulation, I don't know. It feels like it's more representational than, really trying to simulate. One thing I wanted to go into is, though, comparing it to something like Die Macher, where I feel like maybe because of the level of abstraction on this, comparatively, that this actually is doing a better job of kind of presenting a picture of what the electoral policy is. Yeah, sure, we're not tracking each delegate individually. In fact, I kind of dislike the idea of the six-player game because it kind of says, okay, here are all those disparate parties that aren't the big five. So then you largely have said all of the delegates have been accounted for if you're playing in six. I don't mind that much. I feel like three of the big five are similar enough to that coalition that there's room for another party to exist. The party is defined by what platforms you pick more than anything else, so the name of the party is kind of unimportant among the three or four that are kind of more standard political parties. The game does have a number of options. One of them is a solo option where you basically have a bot that plays all the other powers, and you could use it if you don't have 5 players to play, 1 or 2 of the powers, just to kind of randomize things in. There are a couple of others having to do with they have this Nazi orator, which kind of replaces the demagoguery with a more die roll type thing. I like the high risk option of the big lie, and I think that adds an excitement to the game. This other one creates something that's not too impressive. Instead of that big lie thing, the Nazis essentially have a 1 in 6 chance of getting an additional delegate on each election if they have the orator. And then there's an open order option where all the different parties have that kind of option. Well, you could use this even if the Nazi has demagoguery, so that's a little different. Then they have a couple of options where you pre-program your entire election strategy and then just run through them. And I feel like that may be kind of a neat exercise, but man, it just doesn't sound like fun. The fun to me is, as things are revealed, you're playing this psychology game based on what the emerging situation is. So I find that kind of cool. I would find a completely pre-plotted game to be pretty damn boring. My battery's almost dead, so I'm just going to say, this was a fun little game for what it is. It's not the kind of thing that you drag out, every month or something like that and want to play with your group. It's the kind of game that I really love for moderate, smaller sized games. It's going to take 4 hours probably to play. It doesn't look like it's going to, but it actually will take 3 or 4 hours probably. Which is something that you'd play, and maybe 2-3 years later you'll do it again. It's not like, oh, I want to figure this game out. It's nothing like that. This is a fun amusement and diversion, which is what I kind of do gaming for. A place where you can hang out and have some enjoyment with your friends, and also a little bit of competition maybe a lot of competition in the same element, without without it being some kind of let's all sit around the table and try to figure out what we're going to do in our next turn so we don't slow anyone up. That's actually one of the things I don't like about the A2XXs is that they tend to be very cerebral, sit here and plan things out. Even in my old groups, there'd be talking and enjoyment and everything, but there's a lot more thought in it. It's not naval war, but it's also not. It's not an 1830, you know. Anyway, I had fun with it, and I really don't have a whole lot to say. I mean, the best thing I can say is just look at how it plays. That's what you're gonna see. The mechanisms you're either gonna look at them and say, "Wow, these really suck," or "Yeah, you know, that's actually really cool. You can get by with a pretty small set of rules, not minimalist. It's not like, you know, Parcheesi or something, but it's also not something that you're constantly referring to the rules and trying to figure out what this card does or something like that. It just plays." All right, let's send it out.